Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan at MSP. It's Ukraine War frontline update for the 12th of July 2024. I'm not using the Institute for the Study of War. I'm doing a slightly quicker one. I've just spent an awful lot of time doing an extra video, which will be released probably later tonight. If you don't know what the lines on my map mean, please check out the screen at the moment. Pause the video. I really appreciate JR, who has done the mapping today. Lots of pins on the map, and most of them the wrong colour. I think it is very difficult for the Ukrainians at the moment. I do believe that that the weather is not helping. Really hot for both sides, to the point of it being problematic. You obviously want it to be hard ground in the summer, but when it gets to literally record-breaking temperatures, things get a bit challenging. Speaking to Greg on the private chat, seems like things are difficult. New York, Tourette's in a really bad shape. Chasiv Yar's horrible. It's all a bit of a shambles. Artillery struggling. The only place that seems to have decent artillery working is Orikhiv. Yeah, places getting smashed with rockets. Heat's affecting both sides. Orikhiv is burning. So on and so forth. So it's really tough out there, I think, for the Ukrainians, obviously for both sides though. Orikhiv is down here by Robotina, so this is the area where Greg says the artillery is working well for the Ukrainians. They are definitely struggling in these other places, but the question I keep saying was, how much strength and depth do the Russians have? Tourette's here is a worry, I think. Krasnohorivka will eventually fall, and the Russians are grinding on here. They will meet some major, I think, fortifications in this general area before they get to Pokrovsk. Cutting that road is a worry. They have not made any further inroads, it seems, to the west of Mariinka. They might pick up there again, but there are a few sort of towns that are a bit of a worry as they move towards Kharkova there. And Konstantinivka, I think, is a worry, but they don't seem to have moved too far on from Paraskevivka. So, yeah, it's difficult, but they seem to have kept that in check. Chasiv Yar is obviously really, really tough, but now the Russians have to get across the canal there. We'll come to all these places in more depth, and they are just pushing in so many other little places as they appear to be going for that almost a deep battle doctrine of pushing everywhere, waiting to see if there's a weakness and then exploiting that weakness by piling in. Right, we are going to go to the northern sectors where, as you can see, Surrey Maps has the Russians push back in Glebeke, around these northern agricultural warehouses, push back there to be somewhat in line with Andrew Perpetua's Russian defensive line there. So the Ukrainians having some success there, but it looks like, as according to Surrey Maps at least, no other mappers stating this, that the Russians have, and there was talk about the Russians moving across the Vovcha River and south towards this. I think there's a sports ground somewhere around here. I don't know if it's that one there. It looks like it. But yeah, the Russians taking control of all of that. That's a Russian, I think, MOD claim. Remember, Surat Mats very much just jumps on the Russian MOD claims and sort of unquestioningly takes them on. Words are so difficult, especially when you said a million of them today already. They take those claims on from the MOD without any kind of skepticism and then put them on a map. So we need to be a little bit careful. It's not to say that they aren't having some success in these areas and pushing back the Ukrainians there, as claimed to the northeast of Vovchansk there. Some small gains for the Russians too. We'll see if the other mappers agree with those claims over the next day or so. Then when we come down to the northeastern axis from Kupiansk to Svatova to Kreminna, down there we can see that there are red pins and a number of places along here. Worryingly, just to the northwest of Sinkivka in the forest area there, Russians pushing forward a little bit. Again, only from Surat Maps, no change. In fact, very, very big difference between Surat Maps and Andrew Perpetua, with the deep state map in the middle there, that could indicate that that it's difficult to be able to map for sure in these forested areas where its geolocation becomes quite difficult due to the tree coverage. You can't make out the landmarks of things like, windbreaks, tree lines, rivers, and whatnot so easily. Okay, here we have some Andrew Perpetua kind of agreeing with previous mappers, both Deep State and Syriac maps, where the claim was that the Russians have advanced towards the Oskil River to the west of Vladimirovka, north of Berestova in the Pischany area there. So just to give you a sense of where we are, we've got Svatova here. There are two areas to the northwest of Svatova where the Russians are pushing. One of them is in this, as I say, Krokmalna, Vladimirovka area, and the other is slightly further to the south around Kolomyachika, where the Russians are pushing right into Stelmakivka. And as mentioned yesterday, this was on yesterday's map from Syriac maps, but it had just been updated as I did the mapping update myself. So I talked you through the tweet, but it was not on our map because it had only just come out. But anyway, that's to confirm that the Russians have pushed forward a little bit in that area too. And then Andrew Perpetua has the Russians a little bit further forward than he did, but actually just agreeing with what was already said by the other mappers just north of Makivka. So some of these, although there are a lot of pins today, that was yesterday's. This is an agreement with what had already previously been mapped by the other mappers, and the same with that area there. So that really the new ones are the two we've seen up in the north, and then this one up by Sinkivka there. Right, then we come down and there's a bit of a change. No Reports actually says a little bit about Lyubimka. I forgot to mention that up to the north of Kharkiv. New geolocated footage confirms our early assessments. Ukrainian forces here advanced into the northern part of Lyubimka. Fighting is ongoing in the center of the settlement. Anyway, that's just to let you know what they say. But the Seversk front line, some gains for the Ukrainians, so that's good news for them. Where the Russians have been pushed back in the Verkhnokamianska area to the west of Verkhnokamianska on the way towards Verkhnokamianka, because nothing says confusion like two very long words that are almost the same, very close to each other. Okay, so good news for the Ukrainians there. That's broadly in line with that's between the other two mappers, Syriac maps, pushing the Ukrainians. The Russians back there, sorry. Whether that's a rejig or an area where the Ukrainians have counterattacked over the last day or so, I don't know, because actually there's no claim in a separate tweet or anything. And sometimes Syriac map does that, seems to do that more when the Ukrainians make a gain. It's just quietly change the map without discussing it. Anyway, no change to Chasiv Yar, even though it is hellish around there. A lot of aviation active and artillery active around Chasiv Yar. It has been absolutely blitzed as a town, but it is fairly well dug in. It's going to be interesting to see how the Russians try and do this. I would have thought they'll be making moves to go across the culverts where there is no need to cross the canal itself, because it's kind of tunneled under these areas. There are pipelines that they have to deal with there, but other than that, that would be, I would have thought, the most sensible places to attack. But then if the Ukrainians know they're going to attack from there, they can prepare to defend those places. So no change to Klishchivka area. And then we come down to Toretsk, where not so much no change to the two areas, this kind of pincer around Pivnichne, where the Ukrainians have been under a lot of pressure. It's New York that is the issue for the Ukrainians, and where the Russians have had a lot of success. I've just taken off Perpetua's Ukrainian defensive lines just because there are quite a lot of lines in this area. You can see that the Russians are gaining all over this salient, this bridgehead. It's a very thin one, and I talked about how before this is evidence, I think, that the Ukrainians do have a very thin defense around here. They weren't particularly expecting the Russians to attack around here, and that might mean that they aren't so deeply stacked in terms of their reserves and whatnot, and they might not be yet in a good position to be able to counterattack and cut this off at the base. But then, they might not be able to do that. They might not have the reserves at all to be able to commit to here. And it's a case of containment rather than counterattacking. But you would think an attack across there would isolate all of these Russian troops. It would be a pretty sensible thing to do if you had the troops to do it. So the fact that they aren't doing it probably indicates that they can't do it, that they don't have that depth of reserves, which is worrying in and of itself. So anyway, some gains. This tree line here, both Surat Maps and Andrew Perpetua agreeing that that's now fallen under Russian control. Andrew Perpetua just changing up on the western side of that bridgehead and then at the top as well. And then we come to, in fact, let's go to Surat Maps just talks about, Null Reports actually talks about the New York area where we just were. Russian forces have continued their advance into the settlement and made their way to the center. Fighting is currently ongoing. While Russian aviation is dropping guided bombs such as the Fab 500 or 1000 increasingly on Ukrainian forward positions. And, part of the course is part of their combined arms maneuvers moving ahead of, after blitzing the areas with these huge bombs. Right, then when we come to the Avdiivka sector, you can see that Surat Maps has some gains going towards that T0504 highway, joining Pokrovsk over here to Konstantinivka up on the that semicircle of cities behind Chasiv Yar. That the Russians are getting closer in that northern area. Surat Maps says that the Russians began advancing eastern Novoselivka Persia, and continue advancing north of this locality, taking control over the trench system, Sandclock trench system. Moreover, Russian forces made new advances towards Vozdizhenka. So that is the advances towards Vozdizhenka, which is there. They are moving out from Novo-Alexandrivka, but then further down here around Novoselivska Persia, the idea is that they are now in control of a Sandclock trench system somewhere in this location and are more actively, according to Surat Maps, they're inside Novoselivka Persia to the north there and taking some agricultural warehouses and whatnot to the north of that town, as well as approaching from the east. So it's not looking good for the Ukrainians for the time being. Just north of there, Andrew Perpetua agreeing that the area just to the west of Sokil, north of Voskhod, is now under the Russian control. But again, that's not anything that is new. That's just agreeing with the other two mappers there from their previous movements. Now we go to Null Reports, who says Russian forces, this is in the Yevhenivka Sokil area that we just were at. Russian forces have advanced south of Yevhenivka after taking control of Sokil. In the area, Russians are rapidly advancing as Ukraine is taking up new defensive positions that are situated further to the west. So that is in this area. And you've got Yevhenivka. Where are you? There's Sokil. I think is that here? Anyway, yeah. Let's go further to the south as we come to Krasnohorivka. I think we have a claim concerning Krasnohorivka. No, it's in Novoselivska Persia. It's a further claim from Surat Maps that the Russians have seized those northern warehouses I was just mentioning. But yeah, here we go. In Krasnohorivka, the situation has been updated. The area in the southeast that was previously considered a grey zone due to a local Ukrainian counterattack is now again occupied by Russia. Russians also moved into the center, coming from the east. The situation does not look good there. As I said earlier, I think you'll see this fall. There's no doubt about that. I think so. Where Null Reports was talking about is this area to the southeast, where the Ukrainians had done this weird counterattack. You'd seen Bradleys driving sort of down here and whatnot. And anyway, that was some time ago now, and the Russians seem to have just completely taken that back and are increasing their control further to the northeast and just going into this central kind of park area by this stadium there, or some kind of sports ground. But yeah, the Russians, as according to both Andrew Perpetua and Surat maps, just consistently taking land in that town. So Krasnoyarivka under more and more pressure. And then just seeing if there's anything else. No, we're going to move on to Uruzhina. So the only other change to the whole front line, no change to Dnipro River, no change to Robotina, just a slight change to the Velika Novosilka sector, where the Russians have taken a tiny bit of Uruzhina as they move on through there. So that map says situation on, not on that front, situation on the Velika Novosilka front. The Russian army is already fighting in the center of Uruzhina after taking the last warehouses in the south and a series of streets. So these are the warehouses they're talking about, taking those and then starting to move through Uruzhina towards the north. Not yet agreed upon by the other two mappers, Deep State and Andrew Perpetua. So that's the situation. Quite a lot of pressure in a number of places. A few of these pins are confirmation of what was previously claimed, but certainly a few new ones to add on, further grinding territory gained in some of the usual places, but a number of sectors opened up now on this northeastern axis from Kupiansk to Svatova to Kreminna. Definitely, Russians are definitely sort of pushing, I guess, as much as they can, everywhere they can, given that it is a case of making hay while the sun shines. This is the summer. Yes, it's hot, super hot, record-breaking hot, but it's going to be easier for them to attack now than to attack in the midst of the very wet autumn that will no doubt follow. And that means their mechanized equipment is going to be very difficult to shift. So really, I would expect this to be, and this is what was predicted before, that they were saying this is going to be the most difficult period right now for the Ukrainians, sort of July, August, and into September. So yeah, that is fitting with what we are seeing. It's definitely challenging, but the Ukrainians are looking to get F-16s. Be interested to see how soon the F-16s will start operating towards the east. They'll be much more likely to be flying back here to shoot down missiles and drones, sort of find their feet, if you like, or find their wings, and then you'll see them push further and further, I think, to the east before they'll be used nearer the front lines. But certainly they're on their way. More and more equipment is on the way, but a lot of that seems to be focused on air defences. I'm wondering whether you'll get a big old batch of Bradleys and other fighting vehicles coming soon. Of course, the Ukrainian indigenous manufacturing capabilities are being ramped up, so that there will be an increased capacity for, we're seeing Bogdana, the self-propelled howitzers, starting to roll off those production lines. Whether we'll see the Lynx infantry fighting vehicles made by Rheinmetall or the Fuchs APCs made by Rheinmetall come off the production line soon, I don't know. There were claims that they should be being produced by the end of this year. We shall see, and that'd be super useful for the Ukrainians if they can start making their own infantry fighting vehicles and plan them in to get to the front lines to help secure the positions they have. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Really appreciate your support. Take care. We'll speak soon.